Visiting Wilkes County on business or pleasure? Stay in Wilkesboro at the Holiday Inn Express, Hampton Inn, or Red Roof Inn and Suites. Enjoy Southern hospitality, cozy rooms, and a complimentary breakfast. Explore the mountains and then relax with us. You've earned it. Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations. Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of Life in Wilkes.
Ken Welburn, how are you?
Oh, it's a great day. It's good to be here again, Carl. It's always a pleasure to be down here with Life in Wilkes. It's been a great enjoyment for me.
Well, you know, you certainly are a big part of Life in Wilkes and the history that you know about, which we'll get into that. But you have a big now as well. I mean, you have a very active life now. That hat you're wearing, or cap you're wearing for Rotary International, you've been a Rotarian for a long time, haven't you?
About 25 years, yeah.
I noticed over the years that some of the people that you talk about in the context of history in Wilkes County, some of those are also Rotarians, aren't they?
Oh, yes, sir. Many fine folks have been members of Rotary, and we have a good history since 1965. And I like to say that if you look around our county and our towns, most any project of any size has got a Rotary footprint on it somewhere, and we take great pride in that. And as you know, we have the Fairgrounds down there behind Cook's, and we have our county fair coming up in October. That's a big event, a big family event for the community that people look forward to every year, and it's just we have several projects like that we're able to make some money on to plow back into the community, but also just to show people what they can do and stay home and enjoy Wilkes County.
That's a nice thing. I think it's important to mention that from a Rotary International standpoint and Rotary clubs all across America and around the world, actually to have a fairground or property that you own or a place you own, that's not something everybody has. So that's a unique characteristic for what you're doing. Others have places too, I know, but are you the only? Does Rotary in Wilkes have the only fairground that you know of that are owned by Rotarians?
To my knowledge, it's the only fairground owned by anybody. Yeah, we have made it. It used to be part of the old airport years and years ago.
Okay.
As a little boy, I would go out to the banks over there, where it's now West Park, and we'd sit there and in dusk we'd watch planes land, and they'd have a car out there with the lights on, flying down the runway because the plane didn't have any lights, and they had to use the car to land by. You know.
I didn't know that. So that was the first airport in Wilkes County.
Yes, it was. And those buildings at the fairgrounds are all old parts of the old fairgrounds, and there was a brickyard there at one time apparently. And when you start digging around there, it's hard work. But we have a great place. We have about 14 or 15 acres there, and have it all fenced in and take good care of it. And just got through having a great auction down there. The W&W auction people had a big equipment auction, very successful.
And that all benefits Rotary, but because of what, the rental?
Yeah, right. The rentals. Okay. We call that passive income. We don't have to go out and handle anything much, but they look after it. And but it's a great little fairgrounds. And you know, I mentioned our county fair, and you know, some places those are fading away, but ours is still strong. People want a good place to go, but one of the favorite things for all the Rotarians is that on one day of the fair each year, we open it in the morning at 10 o'clock. And on that day, all the EC kids, all the handicapped children, all the folks that have special needs that we can identify and get there show up. And we open up the entire fair for them. They get to ride the rides. They get to play the games. It costs them not a penny. Mm-hmm. And I like to say that that day they are not the exceptional children. They are the rule. And it's the one.
That's wonderful.
It's one project. We never have to pass a sign-up sheet around. We know that the Rotary will be there for them. And those children look forward to that. Some of them like Christmas almost. And it's just a great blessing to everybody. And one of our favorite parts of the fairgrounds.
And that's the fair rides, and that experience is there for them. But you also do lunch as well, right?
We feed over 550, 600 people that day. Yeah, it's a great time, you know.
Do you remember the first one?
Well, they've been doing it as long as I've been a Rotarian, and I remember the first one, and I never missed one since. Yeah.
What was it about that the first one that you went to as a Rotarian? What did that let you know that, hey, this is the right club for me?
Well, I certainly didn't have any idea how it would affect me. But to see those children smiling and their caregivers smiling and just having a good time when they were nobody's way, it just was a blessing to me, and I've never forgotten it. And they're kids I see now and then out somewhere at some other kind of event, and they'll come up and they'll hug me and they'll talk about coming to the fair, and that's a blessing like no other.
It's interesting, that conversation and the thought that you've just stirred up there, that there have to be special things like that, just to where some people can feel normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As I said, they're the rule, not the exception that day. Yeah.
That's nice. So Rotary has the park, and it does all sorts of things. I remember a few years ago, we were in town working on some stories, and you introduced me to one of the people who was performing. And Bob became a pal, and he was the ventriloquist, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of those odd years of timing, but I think it was maybe in the midst or before or coming out of COVID. Somehow your dates that year were different than other dates, right?
Right, but we don't have him this year, but we have him back for next year.
Right.
And people ask about him all the time. He was a crowd for the children loved him. He just he's one of those guys that would come for free if we couldn't pay him, kind of thing. He loves what he does.
Well, he was great because he sat right there where you are for life in the Carolinas, and he brought baby Elvis.
Wait, where are we? Where are we? You don't know where we are? No. What does this room look like to you? Jail? No, we're not in jail. No, we're not. Listen, what? There's a lot of listeners listening to us on this podcast. Really? That's right. Have you ever talked to a large crowd before? I sure did. Really? What did you say? Not guilty. This is baby Elvis.
Baby Elvis. Well, Bob was certainly a great guest. We enjoy getting to know him, and we become friends. That shelf that you're looking at back there, or you're not looking, you're looking at me, but behind you with all the cameras, we have a radio collection too. But Bob sent a vintage piece to go back there, and he didn't say anything about it while he was here. I just went to the post office one day, and there it was, and it says, enjoy and always remember. He said, I'll always remember the Saturn peaches. Remember that year that we went to Brushy Mountains,
right,
and he had never experienced Saturn peaches, and he was like, I reckon I can get those in Charleston. I said, no, I don't think you can. I think they have such a short shelf life. You got to eat them here. So for a year, he would send me notes about the Saturn peaches.
Those Saturn peaches, or donut peaches, or whatever you want to call them, are taste like no other. My grandchildren always want to know when they get some more peaches.
That's right.
And to go, and speaking of Mr. TV, Paul, he was here for your apples recently. But
that's right.
That's where we get those peaches, and it's just visiting them. Even when they're sold out, you have a nice time because they're such nice folks to visit with while you're there.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people who grow things and people who have that temperance to be patient enough to grow vegetables or trees or grapes or whatever, there's something special about them, don't you think?
And they certainly got to have a lot of patience, and I don't begrudge farmers what they get for their products. I'll put it like that.
You don't think you'd make a good grape grower?
I spent the summer when I was about 7 years old with my grandmother Welborn, and my grandmother Welborn felt like if you were sitting at her table for supper, you had earned a place to sit. Even if you were 7 years old and you're a mama mom was sick and you're crying yourself to sleep every night. It was awful. And hoeing corn and messing, and I just, that's all the farming I ever did, and I don't want to do any more.
There's a reason you go to the farmer's market and you're extra friendly with the farmers, right?
And never fuss about what they're charging me.
I love that. Well, we're fortunate in Wilkes County to have a lot of people that know how to grow things and make things and put on experiences that make all of our lives a little bit better. Now, you were recently, earlier today, that's real recent, you were at the Quilters Guild annual gathering, right?
Down at the Stone Center, yes. And today was their 26th event. I, by the way, am a lifetime member of the Wilkes County Quilters Guild, right, even though I can't sew a stitch.
I'm getting ready to say, that's why your finger was so bloody a week ago. Okay.
No, they're just kind to include me. Right. But today's event I went to, and they have 104 quilts on display. It is worth your trip down there anytime. They have a drawing for a big, beautiful quilt that they raffle off, but it's about the most friendly group of people. A lot of them are strangers, but they're not strangers for long. Right. It's a great event, and that group raises a lot of money and helps a lot of people, and they just do a great job. And they'll be there tomorrow. They'll be there today till 6 o'clock, and tomorrow till 9 to 4, I think it is.
And they do them every year.
Yeah, and it's their 26th year this year. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's great. Well, we made friends with them some years ago, and they actually made a quilt for the show, and for Life in the Carolinas, and it had North and South Carolina and landmarks in both. So an awful lot of work went into it, and they presented it to us one year at Christmas, and I said, okay, those ladies are great. And I thought they were great before, but good people just never stop caring and giving, do they?
It's funny you talk about making a quilt for your show. The last time I got married, they made me a quilt, and I've got it rolled up and stored in case I ever need it again.
Your show got canceled.
Yeah.
You should have, 4 or 5 quilts by now?
I'm just going to use that same one again.
Oh, my goodness. Well, there you go. I'm just glad I don't have to remember all their names.
My poor dad, talking about remembering their names, he would call the roll, and then they'd fuss at me and say, well, whoever, and that'd make it even worse. But that's the way it goes,
Well, that's the life of a collector, I guess.
You guess, yeah.
Well, my goodness. There was a story that I saw not long ago about these couple of guys that got in a fist fight, and they were having a problem, and somebody was upset, and they ended up in the paper, and somebody said, well, look, don't be doing that on the street if you don't want to end up in the newspaper. Yeah. That kind of made sense to me. But there's so many things that you have in your history. And some of those stories with Max Feree, those were stories those were definitely in the papers, but it'd be something probably most people would have forgotten about, or maybe don't even know about. Have you got a great Max Feree story you want to share?
Oh, I got to tell you. Back in the 50s, a young attorney came to Wilkes County named Max Feree with his family, and I got to know his boys, and so therefore got to know their dad some. But and then as an adult, I came to just love him. He was an amazing guy, and back in the early days when he was first here, he represented a lot of folks. As years went by, his practice probably got, for lack of a better term, maybe more able to pay him but he started off with a lot of old folks that just needed some help, and he never turned anybody down. But my favorite that I love to hear about, there was a guy that Max represented named Roy Lowe. Oh. Now, Roy Lowe was, for lack of a better term, a bootlegger his whole life. He made that liquor and sold it, and that's what a lot of people did. And just for the record, and I do like to put it that way, most of those old bootleggers felt like they weren't doing any harm, The only person they hurt was the tax man, and said you can even look in the Bible. The tax man gets bad press, So they didn't feel like doing anything wrong. Right. But anyway, Roy, they tell all kinds of stories on Roy. They said one time his buddies were going to pick him up, take him to go make liquor in the dead of winter. His wife came out on the porch just as he was getting in the car with him and said, "Roy, are you going to leave me here without a stick of stove wood?" He said, "Honey, I'm not taking the axe with me." But and the stories go on and on of the things he would do. And they said one time he'd been drinking right much of his own stuff and was in pretty bad shape. And his wife had a cloth on his forehead, and she said she just looked up at the ceiling and said, "Lord, please don't let my old sorry drunk husband die." And they swore at Roy, said, "Honey, tell him I'm sick. Don't tell him I'm drunk." and the story's going to be about Max, but Roy will keep you here a while too.
Right.
But he was a wonderful guy, and everybody loved him. But anyway, Roy, one day was driving, and he hit a patch of ice, and he slid out of the road on a curvy mountain road, and into a big thicket, and couldn't get the car door open, and he was just so stuck in there, and he found a quart of whiskey under the front seat. And he drank a little whiskey to get warm, and because it was wintertime, and he got so warm he couldn't even hardly move. And but anyway, it steadied his nerves, but it steadied him about too much. But anyway, somebody found him, and sure enough, they could tell he'd been drinking, and they charged him with a DUI, driving under the influence is what they called it back then. Well, Roy was one of Max's clients, However, in those days too, occasionally the solicitor's office, and they called them most of the time back then, if they had somebody on vacation or something, if they had an attorney in town they knew that wasn't real busy right then, they would help them fill in and stuff like that. And this was a week when this came up for Roy that Max was helping the solicitor. And so he didn't know what to do. He didn't want Roy to go get another lawyer. And as the story goes, he told Roy, said, "Look, I'm going to be kind of on the other side of the fence, but you just let me lead you through, give me yes and no answers, and we'll make this as painless on you as we possibly can. It shouldn't be a big deal. It hadn't happened before, and you're telling the truth, So anyway, the day came to court, and they swore in Roy. And Max started asking him questions and said, "Now, it's true that you were driving on such and such a road?" "Yes." "And you slid out of the road hit a patch of ice?" "Yes." "And you'd not been drinking, had you?" Said, "No, I had not." And he said, "Well, you got down there and you couldn't get your car door open. You got scared and you found that bottle of whiskey under the front seat and just drank a little bit to get warm. And by the time they found you, maybe you drank a little too much, and they charged you with driving under the influence. But that's not true, is it?" He said, "No, sir, that's not true. I was not driving under the influence." Well, it went on back and forth, several little things, And then Max, it kind of hit Max. Oh, golly. I mentioned he was drinking bootleg liquor in the car, and he shouldn't have had any of that. So he thought, he said, now, Roy, let's just make sure the court understands you have no more of that white liquor at your house. Is that correct? He said, "That's right, Mr. Feree. You bought the last case Sunday." And so, anyway.
Is that true?
It's the folks that told me say it was.
That's true.
But it's certainly believable if you know Max.
Oh, it's a great story.
If you know Max, it's certainly believable. But
wow.
But he was a great guy and a great sense of humor. And I've probably said this before, but I remember writing a column one time, and I made the comment, I said, "Now, the truth is I've stolen this story from Max Feree." And sometime a couple of weeks later, I got a big package in the mail addressed to Kenneth P. Welburn, Esquire. And I opened it up, and it said, "Dear Mr. Welburn, regarding your confession to stealing my stories, if you're going to steal them, get them right. Enclosed with some samples." And he had some great stories he'd written and saved through the years, and I still have that file. And I miss him. He was a good man. I remember seeing him after his wife died. He'd be out to eat lunch a lot by himself. And whenever I'd see him having lunch and he was by himself, I'd sit down because it was like going to school. He was like going to school. He was an amazing fella. And one time, after his wife had been dead a pretty good while, I said, "Max, I got a question." And he said, "Okay, what is it? Can I ask you anything?" "Kenny, you can ask me anything. It's okay. What's your question?" I said, "Well, when Miss Feree died, I noticed you had the wake at the Elks Club instead of the funeral home." He said, "Yeah." I said, well, why was that? I was easy, he said. Rain started, wouldn't sell no liquor for me. And so that was Max.
Right. That was
Max.
He wanted to have an authentic wake for her.
Boy, he did.
Yeah.
But I miss him. He truly, truly was a fine man.
Can you imagine life at its fullest without characters like that we take time to sit down and talk to and get to know, and because that's not something everybody's experienced before. But hearing these stories now, we know that people are. It's reminiscent for people who are listening to the show and hearing you tell these stories. But I can't imagine you without that in your life. You're always since I first met you, you've always shared stories about other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am, and I of course, my favorite subject to speak of you is me, but right. but for me, it becomes a great blessing too. Just like now, we mentioned a little while ago about going to the quilt show.
Right
now. When I went there today, I went to take pictures, and we've already got a piece posted on the Wilkes Record Forum, and to try to promote their event because it's a wonderful group of people. But the blessing for the day was for me, because I could remember when my mother, who loved to sew, my mother, as a young woman, had something called phlebitis in one leg, and I don't really know much about that, except as long as she lived,
it hurts.
She referred to that as her bad leg. Right. Well, we had an old treadle sewing machine. Now, I'm 75 years old. I was a little boy way back in the early 50s. She still had the old treadle sewing machine, old Singer, and I had to sit in the floor, and she'd say, "Start, stop, start, stop." And I had to run that pedal to sew the things for her sewing things. And she loved to make quilts. And
so you got to work out.
When I think how many times I didn't want to sit there and do that, and how I'd give anything I've got to get to do it for 5 minutes today. It just warms my heart. And I have cut for my mother uncounted thousands of little small triangles, little fabric triangles, and then on that old treadle machine, I would sew the first two pieces together into makes a small square. I never could ever, and I tried, but I never could ever make those squares. When I tried to sew them to other squares to make a bigger piece, I never could make that match up good. But I could do this for the first one. And I can't tell you how many times quilts went out of that house that I'd put the first square, all those squares, I'd made the first square of them myself. And Mama would say, "That's one of your quilts, Kenny." and so, memories like that, to get to think of my mama, it just made my day. I just walked around there. I was the happiest guy in the place, and I could see things that might look like something she might have done. Although most of what she did was very basic compared to these. Still, the whole point was it was my mama and me time together, and it's priceless. And to get to remember that, it warms me up, and so for that, I love those quilters, just because they are such a backhanded part of my childhood, with no intent whatsoever that happening. It just does, And
so has either one of those quilting members, I was going to say ladies, but there are men that quilt too. More ladies that are quilters, but there are men that are quilters as well. You were one of them, starting out just one piece quilt, but that was your part. So do those quilters know that about you, that you started that first piece with your mom and you did lots of those? Well,
every year when I go, several of them know it, because in the process of how you doing today, I say, "I'm doing great. You're making me think of my mama." And I tell that story. I was telling that to Lynn Osborne and Missy Sievert today. The lady Lynn is running the show this year, and Missy's their treasurer in the group, and I it just does me good, and makes it's a little bit like my dog. It makes everybody smile, and when you make somebody smile, you've done the right thing.
You were on the street not long ago with Angel, your dog, and you were out for a quick early morning walk. And a new white car pulled up, and the lady rolled the window down. Tell us what happened.
Well, this big, the pretty white car drives up, and Angel and I are on the curb there, and we'd just come out. We just gotten out of bed and going to go for our morning walk, and the lady rolls the window down and says, "Oh, what a pretty dog." Now, I got to tell you, she is a pretty dog. There's no question about that. She catches people's eye. And so we were talking back and forth, and Angel turned around, she looked, she saw her face, and she just immediately falls in love with Angel. And she said, "Do you mind if I pet her?" And I said, "Well, not a bit." And I presume she's going to get out of her car. No, she pushes the passenger side door open, and that car looked brand new to me. And the interior was black as the ace of spades. And Angel sheds. She's a white dog, and she sheds. I said, "You're going to get." I don't care. And that dog, I said, "Angel, she wants to pet you." She jumped right up in that front seat, and she first sat looking at me, and the lady was rubbing her back and talking and sat in the other. And she had lost her dog, apparently not too awfully long ago. And finally she said, "Do you think she'll turn around here and look at me?" I said, "Just call her." And she said, "Angel." And Angel turned right around, and Angel was over there. Total had met her 3 minutes earlier, licking her, washing her face, loving on her, and absolutely made that lady's day. And we were on the side of the road for close to 20 minutes. And my poor little dog had not even gone to the bathroom yet. But she's just that good a dog. She could somehow can tell that she was doing the right thing. And I'm so proud of her. I enjoy her so much. And to watch her work the crowd, it's just amazing. I always say she looks like she's running for county commissioner half the time. I think she'd get a few votes. But yeah, that was and those kind of memories. My dog's very special to me, but she's very special to other people, and I like that. She's just
and you're mindful of that.
Oh yeah,
what Angel's doing for other people as well.
And when people come to my office, she barks when they come in. That she hears a little bell on the door. Never makes another sound. There's a young man in there from Minnesota this morning before I came down here, and he couldn't understand how that dog would just take to him that fast. I said, she has no conception of anything but people loving on her and being kind to her. And when I left that guy, he was playing the piano and singing at the shop. We have a great time in there.
Yeah,
I don't do enough work most days to break the Sabbath.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. I don't know if you realize this, Ken, but we have ended a show yet once again talking about Angel.
Well,
we did that last time.
She's on my mind a lot. She's a good girl.
Well, that's it. All right, Ken, as usual, it's great for us to sit together and hear your old stories. But today we heard a few new stories. Yeah. I got to believe that those quilting ladies are going to start calling you. Kenny, we need one piece put in. Could you come and get it started for us? And to which you will say,
of course.
Yeah. Quilting Kenny. That's it. See you next time, Ken.
Look forward to being back again, and it's an honor to be here anytime. I thank you very, very much.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.